God bless you, everybody, and thank you for joining this week's session of Reset Forever Ministries. We are in the book of Ezekiel, chapter number 29. As you know, some may know, we did chapters 27, 20, 26, 27, and 28 last week because they all fit together so well. But we're going to go ahead and jump into chapter number 29 this week. And this is a lesson in the prophecies against, and you can see the topic up there, but this is a lesson in the prophecies against Israel's enemies. So God gives a word to the prophet Ezekiel to tell the people that were enemies against them what their judgment was going to be. Now, remember, the Lord said, remember that um, He says that offenses must come, but woe to them by who those offenses come. So let's go ahead and look into this particular lesson, chapter number 29. Before we go there, of course, I'd like to ask you to share and to tag someone, and definitely like and subscribe yourself as well. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and let's look into them. Ask you to come grab your Bible and let's go together into the 29th chapter of the book of Ezekiel. All right, God bless you. And thanks for joining. I had to run and grab something. All right, so we are in the 29th chapter of the book of Ezekiel. We've come a long way. We're more than halfway through. And remember, I said a few weeks ago that after we get into the later chapters of the 20s, and once we get into chapter 30, that things were going to get better. Well, things are getting better. Now, they were advised, the people of God were advised that there wasn't going to be another prophecy to the people down in Judah until after the fall. So they had said everything that he needed to say, and he had made them aware of everything that was going to happen and how it was going to happen. And then he let them know, God bless you, Mother Wilson, we love you. He let them know that they were going to hear nothing else from him until after the siege. Now, in the meantime, there's other business that has to be handled. And in this case, the other business that had to be handled is God says, now let me go back and I am going to deal with the adversaries of my people because they were his people. He loved them. So that's why he's dealing with their adversaries, because he loved them, and everything that they had to do with anything that hurt them, they had to pay for it because they were guilty. And so the Lord is going to deal with the nations. We did see where he dealt with the Ammonites. And the Ammonites, that was when they were going down to besiege Jerusalem, or they were going down to besiege Judea. And they got to a fork in the road. If you remember that, they came to a fork in the road, and at that fork in the road, one way was to go to down to Judea or Jerusalem to destroy the people that were left there, as God had been prophesying through the years through many prophets, in many ways, in many different days, and many times. And they still rejected, but this fork in the road, one way led down there to destroy them, and the other one led to a place called Ammon, where the Ammonites lived, which were enemies of the people of God. And they had been enemies for centuries to them. So now they get to this place, and when they get there, they try to decide, and this is what really is interesting, that even though they were going to do destruction and harm to the people of God, they were asking for directive. And they were doing it according to their own personal religion. Now remember, Nebuchadnezzar was the one out front. But they were doing this by directives of their particular gods. And so they had methods. We have methods. We seek God and we wait to hear from them. But their methods were different. So they had one method to get an answer. If you heard things like in the scriptures, put a fleece out. They would put a fleece out. And that was one method. Or then there was the Urim and the Thummim, which were the stones that were on the breastplate, the stones that were on the breastplate of the high priest. And they would light up and they would get a message and a directive from them, and it was coming from God. And then sometimes God would just send them a prophet to give them a word. Well, here they get to this fork in the road, and they're trying to decide who they're going to destroy first. And in the process of seeking their gods, it included what they called shaking of the arrows. So I think they marked on each one of them some kind of a marking that would signify the preeminence of the decision on that arrow or direction. The other way was to take out a liver of a freshly slain animal. Strange, but probably was a lamb or something. And they would slay it and take out the liver, and they'd look at it. The colors, the hues, the lines in it, all of those, any imperfections. And that would be how they would guide themselves. So they got to that place and they looked at and they examined and they decided, we're going this way. We're going to kill the people in Jerusalem. All right, we're going to finish them off. Well, that was a prophecy. All right, so that was harsh. But when they got down there, Ammon or the Ammonites were laughing at them, and they were saying, good, kill them, wipe them out, take their babies and throw them against the stone. And they were horrible in the vicious, inhumane methods of murder and destruction of human beings, other human beings. It just goes to show how dark and black-hearted humanity is capable of being. But the problem with that was that God heard them. He had a problem. God heard them. Now, if there's any way you can do something or say something and God doesn't hear it, then there's a chance that you may be able to get by with it. But if he does, and we know that his eyes run to and fro throughout the earth, and we know his ear is not too heavy that he cannot hear, so he sees and he hears all things. Even the conversations and the whispered, the Bible says hand joined in hand. See, these are the things that bring people down to destruction, their pernicious ways. And it was a problem. So God had heard them laughing and even was angry with them for laughing. So last week's lesson, he dealt with the Ammonites. So while they were down there destroying the people of God, the Israelites, destroying Jerusalem, just wrecking the place, taking all the spoils of war. while they were down there doing that, the Ammonites, hey, God bless you, she Jack. And they were down there destroying and taking the blessings of or the spoils of war. And God hears them over there laughing because in their minds they had determined that whatever the Babylonians don't take, we're going to go in there and get it. So we know that they got a lot of things because God gave them the best of the best. I mean, after all, He is their God. And now, they couldn't do what was right. He couldn't get them to be what He wanted them to be, and now He's killing them. That was the word. If you look at it in the scripture, the word was aha, and everything that went behind it. And God despised what they were saying, that word. He said, because you said aha. He said, therefore, when they get finished over here, what they're doing right here, they're coming and they're going to do the same thing to you. All right. Now, that is actually what happened. So when they got finished pillaging and plundering the land of Jerusalem and burning it down, and they took as much as they could uh, for the spoils of war, then they went down and they destroyed the Ammonites. Now, that is the first part. The second part of the lesson, because remember, we went through three chapters, and he talked extensively about a city called Tyre. And you may see it in the Bible as Tyre. It's pronounced tire, just like a tire on a car. But some people look at it and think that it's Tyre. But Tyre was another one of the cities that hated Jerusalem. And while they were going down to destroy Jerusalem, and they found out that Jerusalem was being wiped out, they said, aha, now we can get in, because Jerusalem was a place where people would go in and bring their wares, and they had great trade, commerce there in Jerusalem. So some of the most beautiful fabrics and stones and gems, and some of the most beautiful, like ivory and uh, purple, which was a very expensive fabric, and just all the luxuries and all the opulence that you could want. Those were the things that were being traded in their harbor. But the problem with Tyre, or where Tyre looks at this, instead of seeing it as a tragedy, they saw it as something that they could benefit by. So they said, aha, now we can go down there, and all of that business that they used to get, that we got some of it, but they got, probably the lion's share, let's say. And now that business is going to come to us. We are going to benefit by their demise. That was the cardinal sin. You never look for benefit or pleasure in someone else's demise. And so we read the definition of the word laugh, and God told them, because you laughed. But we read the definition of the word laugh, and I'm going to put that back up. We thank God for being able to even be, numbered among those that are blessed by the hand of God. But now here is what I wanted to read to you. Um, okay, it is going to be a definition that I got out of. Okay, ay, ay, ay. Okay. Okay, that one is one of them. Oh, this is the one I wanted to show you. All right, so let's go here and let's just read it and start off with this and set the table, because now he's dealing with another nation. All right, so laughter was human laugh. What it says is that human laughter, pardon me, would seem to require the obliteration of something or somebody, not merely to be derided, or not just to be broken down or to be demeaned and criticized. and to be, your character assassinated, slandered. He said it's more than that. He said, but the ultimate idea is that at the end of this laughter, that it would not merely deride, but that it would laugh. It meant to laugh others out of existence, so to destroy them. And it's a wicked thing. It's a wicked spirit. It's a wicked heart. It's a wicked mentality. And so, because of that, God hated it. So, Tyre ended up being besieged. Now, this lesson is going to come in at a place where it is very critical to try to understand how vast this army was. So they weren't just a group of people. They weren't just a group of people that were just marauding and taking over other territories, but they were capable of doing numerous things at one time. And the problem down in Tyre is that the way that Tyre was set up is they had an island. And out on the island that belonged to Tyre as well, um, that was part of the city. And then there was a part on the land that was about a half-mile separation. And in the waters, they had their navy and they patrolled the waters and protected them from all of the would-be predators or those that would come in to overthrow them and armies that would try to besiege them. So with them being in the water, their navy fought from the water and their army fought from land. So they put together these hot it was sand and another substance, and they'd heat it up and they'd lob it out at those vessels that would try to come in and take over, and they overthrew them. So they were pretty safe. They were almost impenetrable. So they had been besieged for a long time. Now, only part of it was because they couldn't get out to it, but they could eventually get into the part that was in the landmass. The part that was out in the water was a problem because they could not overcome or overthrow their navy. So now that part of Tyre is still standing. Now the prophecy that went out, that God said, when I get finished with you, I'm going to scrape you and I'm going to wipe you out. I'm going to demolish you. Then I'm going to scrape this city all the way down to the rock. So that was a lot of fury. One thing to overthrow and to destroy and to leave in ruins, but all the ruins, when I get finished judging you, all of your ruins will be in the midst of the sea. And this is a prophecy that would continue to stand even after the Babylonians got in. Now, they did overthrow. It took some time for them to overthrow. And one of the ways to find out is by looking at the words of prophecy. So they will give you dates, and those are significant. So when they say something like the third year of the reign of so and so, that gives you dates. And it's not all going to happen, or you're not going to read it, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in chronological order. Sometimes events happen another way. So there is a way to read and to understand prophecy, and that is by paying attention to the dates. So what we're going to do now, Tyrus gets wiped. It ends up getting wiped out, but I want you to see how this is going to work. So let's go to the 29th chapter. All right, in verse number 1, it says, in the 10th year, in the 10th month, in the 12th day of the month, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying. Now, this is God talking to Ezekiel. He's talking to him in the 10th year, and this is the 10th year of the reign of King Zedekiah. Okay, so he had been reigning for 10 years. So from the very beginning of this, when this book, when I think it was Jehoiakim that was the king, there have been a lot of things that occurred, but Jeremiah's prophecy, his ministry of prophecy is going on and on. And now he's in his first decade, and Jerusalem has not been wiped out yet, but the prophecy had gone. Now in the 29th chapter, we're finding that God had already went out, sent the Babylonians, because, and I didn't mention that, but in that 28th chapter, he said to let them know, Jeremiah, go ahead and mark the calendar because today is the day. Everything I told you was going to happen, it all starts today. So you're rising up, you're waking up, you're getting ready for your day. Just know that before the sun goes down today, the Babylonians will have come in and they will have besieged or surrounded the city. And Jeremiah had no way of knowing that. It wasn't like they had CNN or, they had drones or anything like that. God gave him the word, just like God gave Moses the understanding of how the world came into being. So now they're in the 10th year, in the 10th month, and he says, the word of the Lord came to me saying, Son of man, set thy face against Pharaoh. Now remember, the first ones were the Ammonites. The second ones he deals with are those of Tyre. So these are two nations that were enemies of God. And while God is setting up and while he's using Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, as his own personal instrument to carry this out, he is now going out to deal with their enemies. Well, they had problems with that. Why would you use Babylon to destroy those Babylonians? They have all kinds of gods. They curse you. They destroy others. They're wicked. They're ruthless. I know this is the prophecy of Habakkuk. I know we're not the most perfect people. I know that we have fallen short and we have blatantly, at times, which many people won't say, just in blatant, outright rebellion against God. And so, why would you use them? We're not as bad as them. So, you're going to send them down here because he knew they were treacherous and he knew that they were vicious in their doings. And so God tells Habakkuk, he said, listen, he said, it's going to happen. I'm going to go ahead and put it in just a more modern vernacular. It's going to happen. So don't get lifted up. If your heart is lifted up, you feel that you're too righteous to be destroyed by my methods, then you're lifted up. He said, but the just shall live by faith. So you're going to have to believe me that what I'm doing, and I'm going somewhere with this, and I'm going to do something, I'm going to do a work, and I need for you to continue to worship. And so, of course, if you read Habakkuk, he gains a lot of encouragement. And by the end of his book, which is a chapter number 4, he is worshiping God and saying, whatever happens, however long we have to struggle, and we are in poverty and desolation, and starvation is in the land, I am going to leap upon my high places because I believe that a better day is going to come. Now, that's a hard place for most people to be, where you can't take anything. Sometimes you just can't take anything. If somebody says something to you, they look at you sideways, or they use a tone that you can't take, then you're already ready to drop your, Bible, so to speak, or you're ready to drop, the whole deal and walk away or give up or say, God, you're not fair, you're not just. And that's what that's what Habakkuk did. He said, I'm going to give God this response, and then I'm going to sit back and see how he answers to that. He said, Lord, you're too just. You're too righteous to do that. And he made his argument with God, and then he said, now let's sit back and wait and see what has he got to say about that. How is he going to respond to that? And God responds with, the just shall live by faith. And so he accepts it. Now, that's a hard thing too, I understand. But when we accept it and know that God has a way that we cannot fathom because we are mortal, because we are finite, we have limitations. But if you can trust that God knows what He's doing, it may still hurt, but you know and expect that it's going somewhere. So that was the case. So God now has them under siege, and He begins to talk to Tyre. And He lets them know, you shouldn't have never said, I don't like the way you talk to them. I don't like what you said about me and my people. They are still mine. I still love them, whether they make their bed in hell or whether they ascend into heaven. I love them, and you should have kept your mouth off of them. And so now I am going to wipe you out, scrape you off, and throw everything in the city into the midst of the water. That is a total destruction if there has ever been one. And so they do, but they have a problem with that island out there. But they do for the mainland, they wipe it out as much as they can. They burn it down, they pillage it. But by the time, because they have been sending all of their wares and all of their wealth and their riches and resources out to the island by way of their strong navy. And so they sent it out there. So there was very little left in the land except the people, and they were living on the beggarly elements of the land. And so after they get out there, all that stuff is on the island. Finally, when uh, Nebuchadnezzar breaks in, it had been 13 years. Now, that is from 586 BC all the way down to 573 BC. That's 13 years because the numbers decline as we are coming to the coming of the Messiah, the first advent. So they do. They have nothing. They do that, and when he finally breaks in, there's nothing for him. And so now these men have worked for 13 years. Now you stop for a minute. That may seem like, okay, they worked for 13. Think for a minute. How did you look 13 years ago? Get a picture. Right now they have this thing on Facebook. It says uh, now and then. So it'll have a picture of you from 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago. And then they'll ask you to put a picture up of how you look now. And how did you look 13 years ago? Now, you may have been well rested, eating good. You may have been taking good care of yourself in your youth and your strength. Well, these men have been fighting and battering and struggling to besiege this wall, to scale this wall, to get in and to get at them. And he had been exuding his strength. God bless you, Eric. Exuding his strength to get into Babylon. They did that for 13 years. Now you do that for 13 years. Hard labor, fighting in an army over one place to get in. So by the end of the time that they finally get in, these men have lost their strength, a lot of it, because they've been moving around heavy rocks and all kinds of debris and trying to find spoil, and they're still trying to get um, out to the island, and they don't. So now they don't look as healthy or as youthful. They probably weren't as strong. They probably lost some of their hair. They probably had lost some of their muscle mass. Maybe not the muscle because they were still using it, but they didn't look like the men they had looked for 13 years prior when this fight began. So they go in, and when they go in to get it, they find out there is nothing here. Now, we have been fighting for 13 years. We have been out here fighting, and we have been out here searching and trying to get past this wall for 13 years, and we got nothing. We got nothing, no kind of pay, because that was how they got paid. They got paid by the spoils of war. So whatever they were able to get out there in war, they were getting, that was what they took back. The riches, the garments, the jewels, all of the fine possessions that they owned. And this was a wealthy, opulent city, so they had much to gain. So they thought, but when they got in there was nothing. Now, I have learned to respect and honor that God says, if I'm going to use you, I'm going to pay you for what you've done. So now, since you all have made it so that they would not, and he knew it was going to be that way, but you've made it so that they couldn't get spoils of war. We're going to get them paid, and what we're going to do is we're going to go down to Egypt, where they are wealthy and strong and well endowed with many, many riches and beauty, beautiful things. Now, Egypt wasn't just any old place, and this is what the lesson is taking us to. Now, Egypt, let's read verse number 2. It says, Son of man, set thy face against Egypt, against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and prophesy against him and against all Egypt. So, two things. I'm going to prophesy against your king, and then you people of Egypt. I got a word for you too. So, in verse number 3, he says, Speak and say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee. You never want God to be against you. It's a terrible thing to fall into the hands of an angry God. But he said, Son of man, now I need you to prophesy to Egypt and tell them, I am against you, Pharaoh, number one, king of Egypt, and I'm against the Egyptians. Now, Egypt wasn't just another city. Egypt just wasn't another coastal territory that had commerce and that had wealth. Egypt was actually the second major world empire. There was another one called the Akkadians, and I need to read up on them, but I don't hear much of them. The Akkadians, they were the first ones, and this is after the flood. So all the things that happened after the flood, the Akkadians were the first ones. The Akkadians were the first major world empire. The second one was the Egyptians. Now, these men were brilliant, and to this day, Egypt and many parts of Africa, you will find that there is tremendous intellect, brilliance, ingenuity, creativity, authority. They were wealthy, they had kings, they had princesses and princes. And because they were a nation that was full of idolatry, they had all types of gods and goddesses and ways of worship. That's where they began all of their problems. They began to look at, while they were in captivity, see, you got to watch where you go and who you're around, because while they were in captivity, they picked up on a lot of this idol worship. They picked up a lot of this lewd behavior and the ways that, I mean, Israel had its celebrations and its feasts. They began to look at the way that they celebrated in Egypt and the way that they extolled their gods and how they carried out their ceremonies. And some of them began to like it and to even envy it and desire it and to go after it. That's why I look at that and I say, you know, to this day, people have all kinds of gods. To this day, you can go on Amazon and buy some of these gods that they worship. Not only there, but up in Ephesus, Diana of Ephesus, and a lot of other things, because some of those things have never fallen off the radar with them. And so they got in trouble. They got to be like the Egyptians. They brought some of their Egyptian ways into their land, and that's what got Israel in trouble. You brought in these gods, you brought in this worship, you brought in this behavior, you brought in this offering your children into the fire up to your God. You began to worship the God of the sun. You started worshiping the God of the moon and the stars, and you worship the God of the water. If you go into even Roman and Greek mythology, you'll find out that they had gods for everything. Fertility gods, gods of agriculture. They had a lot of things going on. So good that you're on, Pastor Tracy. God love you, and I do too. We find out that they were enamored with all this, and they got into all this. And so now that God says, Son of man, go and tell Egypt, I have a problem with you. and tell the Egyptians, I am against you. Now, my father used to say this when we were young. He said, don't do anything else. That if I tell you to do something, you do it. And if I have to get on you, I'm going to get on you for old and new. I remember those words so clearly. And what God is going to do is get on them for old and new. He's going to get on them for the influences that they had, and He's going to get on them for the things that they're doing. Now that they hear that the people of God are under siege and that they are in trouble with God, they also God had a problem with them because Egypt was a strong power. Again, they were the major empire at the time. And you know, all through the Bible, we hear about how they keep going to Egypt for help and going, instead of coming to me, God had a problem. Don't go to nobody else when I'm here. God bless you too, woman of God. And, you know, until he was angry with that. So, Egypt, now that you are giving of all of you presented yourself. So now the Babylonians are coming to get my people, and they reach out to you. You need to hear this. They reach out to you and say, help us, please, because the king of Babylon, even Nebuchadnezzar himself, is coming after us, and we are in so much trouble. Please come down here and help us defeat the king of Babylon. Well, he agrees to come. So when he agrees to come, that was their hope. You know, it's like somebody says, okay, don't worry. If they're going to come to you, they got to get through me. We are going to be there for you. And so now they're besieged, meaning their city was surrounded by Babylonians. And so the Egyptian army was, we're ghosting you because we're not coming down there. We're not doing that. And they're in there trembling and they're terrified. And so God says to them, this is what I have to say to you about not keeping your word. So verse number 4, he says, but I will put hooks in thy jaws. You know what? Let's back up because this verse before I said, what did he say? Verse number 3 says, speak and say, thus saith the Lord God, I am against you, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and the great dragon that lieth in the midst of the rivers, which has said, my river is mine own, and I made it for myself. With the great river, this is crazy. I just tell you, when you start getting lifted up in yourself, there's no limits to what the devil will tell you how great you are. So what he did, he became great and he knew he was great. And what he did was started looking at everything. I made this, like Nebuchadnezzar. I made great Babylon. Oh, this is beautiful. All my hanging gardens and all the gold and all the beautiful pillars. I did this. Taking credit, getting lifted up, a haughty spirit, pride that goes before destruction, and the haughty spirit that goes before the fall. This is what was happening to him. Now, here with this one, you know, he says this, and I wouldn't believe it except I'm reading it in the Bible. He said, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, the great dragon that lieth in the midst of the river. He's referring to him. He's saying, you're like the great dragon that lies in the midst of the river. And then a lot of times we would look at that word dragon because we want to know, what is this animal? What is this reptile? How does it look? And how does it differ from anything we've ever seen? And he's referring to, when you do your research, he's referring to some of those huge crocodiles that are in the Nile River, because that's the river he's referring to. He's in Egypt. The great river there is the Nile River. Well, this Pharaoh starts saying things like, I made that river. That's my river. I made it. So, they also just to add to that, they also would get so lifted up in themselves until they would say they were gods. And many of them would demand worship from the people. So this is what's happening. God had heard all of this, and this was now time to deal with it. He said, you great monster, you dragon, in the midst of the rivers, which said, the river is mine, I made it. Now he's mocking back at him. You said you made that river. You so great in your own mind. You're such a legend in your own head until you are now believing this hype and you're taking it too far and you're saying, the Nile River, that's my river. I made that river. That I made it for me. Verse number 4. But I will put hooks in thy jaws, and I will cause the fish of the river to stick into thy scales, and I will bring thee up out of the midst of the river, and all the fish of the river shall stick to thy scales. Now, that's just kind of furthering the metaphor how those alligators and crocodiles, they would go through the midst of the sea, and it wasn't like it was just clean pristine water, but and that their crocodile skin was as smooth and easy to go over like a new pair of crocodiles or alligator shoes, but it was sticky and it had, spikes in it. So he's so big that as he's lumbering and going, these little wildlife creatures would actually append to the outside of their bodies. And so they would be covered in debris and other things. But they were horrible creatures. They were horrible creatures to try to catch and to game. But God said, I'm going to put my hook in your jaw. I am going to fish you out. So one of the commentators said that the way they would catch sometimes and lure these alligators was to throw a pig in on a hook. And just like a worm on the hook for a fish will lure him and you can reel him in, well, the same way with alligator, but it would be a pig and it would lure him and then you could, it wouldn't be easy as I was going to study and look at how they capture alligators. But I've seen enough of, some of these wildlife stories where when they catch an alligator, the first and main thing you had to do, avoid that tail because that tail was very powerful and he was a huge creature. I mean, dozens of feet long, sometimes 15 or more. I've heard of it easily. So they were bigger than that, but God said, you're the monster in the midst of the sea. God bless you, Laura White. But you catch this alligator, you'd have to wrap tape around his mouth so that you can wrap it shut so that he cannot have that advantage. Secondly, you had to, and then take you, because if he gets you in his teeth, he is going to prowl, slow walk his way, and sometimes they ran right back out into the Nile River and take you down and eat you. And they could just see the tussling and the bubbles and all of that from a human being eaten by an alligator. So God said, but I'm going to put my hook in your jaw. I am going to do it, and I'm going to draw you out. One scripture, I think it's Joel. Job, he said, can you draw out Leviathan, which was another sea creature, a huge, probably a overwhelmingly huge crocodile? He said, can you draw out Leviathan? He said, but I can put my hook in his jaw and I can bring him out. He said, but if you ever try it, he said, you're no match for him. He said, and if you ever did it, you regret it and you never do it again if you survive. So it was not easy, but with God, no problem. And so he's talking to him and he's referring to the king of Egypt as this monster or as this great alligator. You're so fierce, nobody can do anything with you. You are just too powerful for anybody else, but not for God. So now let's look at verse number 5. He said, I will leave thee thrown into the wilderness.
thee and all thy fish by the river. Thou shalt fall into the field. Thou shalt not be brought together, nor gathered. I have given thee for meat to the beast of the field and the fowl of heaven. So I am going to take you, I am going to throw you into a field. Now, this is all a metaphor for how God is going to destroy the king of Egypt. Now, the king of Egypt was going to be destroyed. All of that is the way he's going to do it. But the problem with the king of Egypt, now he's walking down the enemies of Israel. And he said, I'm going to get you for that. Now I got them under besiege because you laughed and because you stood in the way and because you said you were so great and you were supposed to help them and you didn't. That's where we're at now. There's a few others we're going to deal with. But in chapter number 29, we're dealing with the king of Egypt. Chapter number 30 is going to deal with them too. We're not going to try to do multiple chapters tonight. But he said to the king of Egypt, he said, I'm going to throw you out into a field and nobody's going to pick you up. You're not going to be gathered together. Nobody's going to go out there and pick up this debris field and take these carcasses and give them, a decent, dignified burial. They're going to be out there, and you too. And you're going to be out there just for the beast of the field, the coyotes and all of those other creatures, the foxes and tigers. You're going to be out there for them. You're going to be food for them. And then what's left, the birds of the fowl of the air are going to come and pluck your flesh from your bones. And they are going to gorge themselves on your blood. Your blood is going to be scattered all over your land. Mr. I made the river and I made it for me. You're high and lofty. I have to bring you down. And now prophesy and tell Egypt, I have a word for you too. So it's not just your king, but you have been lifted up because you are a superpower. The problem I had with you is that you did not go and help them when they cried and said they needed you. Israel said they needed you, and you told them you were going to come, and you lied to them. You didn't show up. While they were being destroyed, the whole time they were expecting and watching and anticipating that at any time you and all the host of people with you and your army, you would come and they would be rescued from the Babylonians. But you didn't do that. So I'm mad at you. Not that you can fight against me and win, but you told them you were going to come. So to lean on somebody, he's spoken of as a reed. And I'm going to put another metaphor on it if you'll let me. But that is the controversy that God has with Egypt. It's heavy. And he didn't like it, even though they were under judgment that they deserved. I don't like you. I don't like what you do. I don't like your ways. They are detestable. They make me angry. So I'm just going to throw your bodies all out in the field. Your blood's going to be everywhere. And then the beasts of the field are just going to devour you. You are going to diminish. And then all the birds of the fowl of the air. And in addition to that, Mr. Superpower, I'm going to downgrade you. So I was reading something online today, and it was all about, this is, Black History Month. And there was something there saying, well, we owned this and we were great. We were engineers, we were artificers, we were a military force. We had riches. We were great. We had goddesses and gods and princesses and kings. And we had beauty and we had wealth. We had artworks and we had ironworks and we had many things that we had sculpted and made. There was beauty and there was wealth and there were treasures there. And someone asked the question in the chat line or in the comment line, and they said, well, we were so great, then how did we lose our greatness? Well, my response was, you can read about it in the 29th chapter of Ezekiel, when they got lifted up or when they failed. God had said how he was going to deal with them, But at the end of that, he was going to downgrade them from being a world power to being a less significant and a less authoritative nation. So that is how the change occurred in Africa. The greatness and the prominence began to come down, not totally by attack on the outside, but some of the attitudes and the arrogance and the things that God despises. And God said, I'm going to destroy you and I'm going to downgrade you. And you'll never be what you were before. And that stands true to this day. God bless you, Maggie. That stands true to this day. If you want to know history, get in the Bible. It will tell you a lot of things that occurred and why things changed hands. I can tell you this. A lot of the places that are under attack right now, and a lot of political things that are going on over even in the Middle East, where there are other territories and properties that were given to the children of Israel as Israel himself um, uh, Jacob began to prophesy to his children, you get this land, you get that land, and you get that land, that's yours. And so people, and I was one of them that said, well, God gave it to them, and that's that. But look at what God says. I'm going to downgrade you, and guess what else? The heathen is going to live in your land. So it's happening right now. So people that weren't granted that land because of what you've done, you have forfeited. And so now a lot of the wars that are going on because of territories. People want territories, especially when you get into places like Africa, because you have natural resources. You have gold, you have the diamond mines, you have the oil, you have various stones that are there. It is very beautiful, and um, there are veins there, the land that you can dig, the gold of Ophir, I think, and it talks about it in Job. He even talks about it. So there's a lot there. Now, the other countries, what they would do while they were a superpower and while they were great merchants, artificers, and agriculturalists, and creative, and artworks, they came down there to see what they had, what is going on in Africa. So they went down there to see what they had. They looked it over. They liked it. So what they would do is just destroy them, kill them, and take that and those beautiful works of art, and those beautiful things, and those treasures, and they take them. So plundering is nothing new. So Egypt, they were your people, or the people, my people, were being plundered, and they asked you to bring your army and help them. You didn't. I got a problem. I'm going to kill you. And all of you Egyptians, you're going to be less than you've ever been. All right, so let's go to verse number 6. And all the inhabitants of Egypt shall know that I am the Lord, because they have been a staff of a reed in the house of Egypt. And that's saying the staff, pardon me, when they got ready, when they were in need, you need a staff. Let's just look at it more like a crutch, or like when people get weaker and elders, and there may be joint pain, or there may be weakness, or they may be a little bit unsteady, so they may need for stability a cane, or they may need a walker or crutches, depending on what's going on. He said that they needed you because they were unstable. They needed something that was reliable to hold them up, to keep them from being torn down, and it was you. So when they grabbed onto you, and you said, yes, I'll come and we'll help you fight the Babylonians. When they grabbed onto you and they held onto you, you you withdrew, and they fell, and they were in great horror, and they were injured by you not coming. So all of these things, and history does repeat itself, and what has been, as Songs of Solomon said, what has been shall be. I think it's Proverbs. So now this whole thing, pardon me, you were like a reed, and they leaned on you, and they took hold of you by the hand, and you did break and rend their shoulders. So it's like if someone grabbed onto your arm and said, "Oh, help me, I'm falling," and you snatch away from them, they may receive some kind of injury because you withdrew from them in such a harsh way, and they were vulnerable, and now the shoulders out of joint. But listen to what God says. So your ways, your evil, it's just it repulses me that this is the kind of a person that you are. Pardon me. 7 says, when they took hold of, no, verse number 8. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will bring a sword upon thee and cut off man and beast. So I'm coming down there. You didn't come and help them. So I'm coming down there and I'm killing man and beast. Verse number 8, out of these. So there's going to be a great slaughter in your land, just like you knew they were getting slaughtered back there and you didn't help. Verse number 9, and the land of Egypt shall be desolate and waste, and they shall know that I am the Lord, because he hath said, the river is mine, I made it. So when I get finished dealing with you, you will know that I am God. You're not God, you're a man. You will know that the prophet spoke the words of God. When all of my judgments have run their course, there'll be no questions that God is God, and beside him there is no other. And he said that the end of verse number 9, because all this, in addition to your, in unfaithfulness and not being reliable, because you, being a man, said that I made the Nile River. I made it for myself. Yes, and Ecclesiastes, I'm going to turn there. 9 and is that 1 and 9? I'm going to go ahead and read that. Pardon me. These lessons are here to teach us something. Therefore, our learning and our admonition. You can't go wrong when you read the scriptures. When you abide by the scriptures, what the scripture says, because there's no failure in the word of God. So chapter number 1, verse number 9, I'm going to go ahead and read it. Thank you, Pastor Tracy. The thing that hath been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. So it's going to keep happening, and it's happening. It was happening then. It was happening before then. It's happening now. All right. So now back in the 11th, in verse number 10, it says, behold, therefore I am against thee. I am against thy rivers. I will make the land of Egypt utterly waste and desolate. That was another question that came up on this site. Well, why does it look like it does? Egypt, how come it's not as lush and beautiful? And I'm certain that in current days, I flew over it. I knew I was over the Delta when I was going Pakistan, and I knew that I could see where the Nile River was, the Red Sea. I could see the Sinai Peninsula. I could see all that. But so I know it's pretty beautiful up close. But it's not what it was. Remember, when God created the world, it was all form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. But when God finished his work, he said, it was good and very good. So I know that was beautiful. But look at what he says here in verse number 10, because they said, how did it look at it? It doesn't even look the same. In verse number 10, he said, I'm going to be against thee and against thy rivers, and I will make thy land utterly waste and desolate, from the tower of Syene unto the border of Ethiopia. So the tower of Syene was like the very northernmost part. Ethiopia was the southernmost part. So everything in betwixt and in between. There in Egypt, when they would make statements to cover the entire land of Israel, there in Israel, I should have said, They would say like from Dan to Beersheba. So when you read the stories or you read in the Bible, it says from Dan to Beersheba. Dan is the uttermost part of the northern tip of Israel, and Sheba would be all the way at the southernmost part. So everything in between, the whole land mass, not land mass, but that whole territory. So I said, I'm going to finish it off and I'm going to go all the way down to Ethiopia. Now, this is no small thing because Ethiopia itself has implications in scripture that it was one of the most beautiful places on earth ever. And that is it's about the fourth chapter of Genesis. And he said that there were four rivers. And there was a place called Eden, the place of Eden, the Garden of Eden, this beautiful place. He said there were four rivers that flowed out of Eden. So there was the life source and flow of water and lush greenage and foliage and beauty and fruits and trees and flowers and every one of those trees, not just the tree of green of good and evil, but all of those trees. It was a tree of life. It was so rich that if you ate of it, you would never die. So they had to, and that was the properties of the tree, and God wasn't changing it for them. He just kept them out of it. But all of the trees had a substance in it that could provide something that the human body would need and that humanity could benefit by. And all of God's foliage, the petals on the flowers provide lavender that gives you fragrance to calm your spirit and to give you rest when you're having insomnia. And there are other properties in these different trees and these different plant lives that are antibacterial, that are healing, that are uh, disease fighting, that can take away issues and skin and body problems almost immediately. So in this place, he said, when I'm going to make you desolate, you're losing all of that. You're not just losing, you know, the beauty of the landscape, but everything that was in, everything that was there. I was so comprehensive. I was so mindful to put every drop of everything you would ever need pertaining to life and godliness in those plants. But he said, I'm going to wipe it out. So that's going to be gone. It's going to be desolate. It's going to be a waste place. And then you'll know that they were talking and prophesying from the Lord. Listen to verse number 11. No foot of man shall pass over it, and nor beast shall pass through it, neither shall it be inhabited 40 years. So I'm going to wipe it out. I'm going to destroy it. I'm going to kill everything. And then for 4 decades, nothing living is going to walk through this land. It's a judgment. It's a judgment. So do you see how Egypt went from being beautiful all the way down to Ethiopia to being lush and beautiful and full of resources to having nothing, and nothing dwelled or inhabited that place for 40 years? I tell you, if you read the Bible, you will understand that God is the Almighty. No foot of verse number 12, and I shall make the land of Egypt desolate in the midst of the countries that are desolate, and her cities among the cities that are laid waste shall be desolate 40 years. And I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and shall disperse them through the country. So I'm going to scatter them all over the place. There's all not going to die, but they won't be living there. So Egyptians moved out to other places around the world, and nothing lived there for 40 years. First, this is all because he said, I am God. I created the Nile. I did it for myself. And you didn't go down there and help them. You see, God deals with our enemies. Do you see how vengeance belongs to the Lord? You never have to take vengeance into your own hands. Because could you have ever done this? You never could have done this. This is something that only God can do. We always sing the song, only God can do it. Only God can do it. But look at what he can only do. I doubt that a lot of people look into all of these things. All right, verse number 13. Yet thus saith the Lord, all the at the end of the 40 years, I will gather the Egyptians. This is beautiful. I'm going to do all this to you and destroy you and scatter you, and nobody's going to live it for you. But at the end of 40 years, he gives us a light at the end of the tunnel. He gives us hope. He gives us an expected end. He says, at the end of the 40 years, I am going to gather the Egyptian people from wherever they were scattered. I'm going to bring them back. I'm going to bring them back. And I will bring them again the captivity of Egypt, and will cause them return into the land of Pathros and the land of their inhabitants, and they shall be there a base company, a kingdom. That is the downgrade. I'll gather them back, but they're going to go into Pathros and they're going to be a base company. So you've lost um, you've lost your leverage, you've lost your dominion, and you're not only going to be downgraded, but you're going to be base. That means now you're at the bottom, okay? But I gathered you together. You did your 40 years. I gathered you together, but what you did is forfeited the greatness that you had because you couldn't do it without your head getting expanded and getting caught up in yourself. And for that reason, I have to do it this way. Yet the Lord said, okay, verse number 14, and I will bring them again into the captivity of Egypt, and will cause them to return into the land of Pathros and the land of the inhabitants, and they shall be their base kingdom. 15. It shall be that the basis of the kingdom, neither shall it exalt itself any more above the nations, for I will diminish it. You I would say he's telling them no matter what you do or how you try or how you get together and meet and how you try to figure out ways to get up higher or to regain your strength, he said, even though you do that, it's not going to work because I'm going to diminish you and they shall no more rule over the nation. So that's the end of your world empire. And they did try to make comebacks. It never worked. 16, and we're almost done. 16, and it shall be no more the confidence of the house of Israel, which bringeth their iniquity to remembrance, when they shall look after them, but they shall know that I am the Lord. You will know that a prophet's been in town. You will know that I have spoke, and you will know that I am the God that killeth and maketh life. And it shall come to pass in the 7th and 20th year, in the first month now, this is another time. The 7th and 20th year, okay. Remember I said reading prophecy, pay attention to the dates. So now what we read first at the beginning of chapter 29 was occurring in verse number 1. It said in the 10th year, the 10th month, and the 12th day of the month, 10th year of the reign of King Zedekiah. 10 years. All right, now he finishes telling them about what he's going to do to Egypt. But now he's saying, okay, now that I've gotten that clear, verse number 17 in the same chapter is now a big jump. Because now he said it came to pass in the 7th and 20th year, in the first day of the month of the word of the Lord came to me saying. So from the 10th year to the 27th year, 17-year gap. A lot happens. So by this time, Tyrus has been besieged because that was a 13-year situation. I could take you to Jeremiah and 39 and 2. I could take you to 2 Kings 25, and we can look at that. But this was, when we opened this chapter, when he began to deal with Egypt, he was in the 10th year. Now he's in the 27th year. So there's a 17-year gap. What had happened at Tyrus happened. What had happened in Jerusalem has happened, the besieged. And now another warning is coming to them, another edict. Listen to what he says. So now in the 27th year, in the 27th year, in the first month, in the first day of the month, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, caused the army to serve a great service against Tyrus. Remember Tyrus? And they got in there and they didn't get any spoil. And those people had worked 13 years, but he was God's servant. And God's like, okay, I got some unfinished business in Egypt. And because of your attitude, I'm going to do what I'm going to do with you and all of your merchandise. He said, in their service against Tyrus, every head was made bald and every shoulder was peeled, meaning they had worked, meaning they had labored themselves into where it was physically taking a toll on them. Their hair had lost over the years and the work that they were putting into it. They probably weren't getting the proper nutrition, stay healthy and wholesome, looking like they did 13 years before. But he picks up. He says every head was while they were fighting against Cyrus, while they were doing service unto me, they were my servants, everybody's head became bald and their shoulders peeled because they put their shoulders to the grindstone and their bodies were wreaking havoc, and they were just being taxed physically. He said, yet had no wages nor army for Tyrus for the service that they had served against it. Now, they didn't get nothing because when they got in there, if you remember when I told you earlier, they got in there was nothing there. So to take the spoils of war, they didn't have nothing. That was their pay. So God says, here's how I'm going to remedy that. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will give the land of Egypt unto Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he shall take her multitude and take her spoil and take her prey, and it shall be their wages for their army. This is how I'm going to pay them. They're going to take your stuff and they're going to get it as pay for what they did down in Tyre, since they didn't get anything in Tyre. Verse 20, and I have given him the land of Egypt. So now he's a superpower. I have given him the land of Egypt for his labor, wherefore with he served against it, and because they wrought for me, saith the Lord. They worked for me, so I am going to pay them. I'm not unrighteous to begin their work and their labor of love. I am going to pay them for their work, and I'm going to use you and all the wealth and opulence you have here to do it. He says, I have given the land of Egypt for his labor wherewith he has served it, because they wrought it for me, saith the Lord of hosts. In the last verse, in that day I will cause the horn of the house of Israel to bud, and I will give thee the opening of the mouth in the midst thereof, and they shall know that I am the Lord. So now I'm going to give another word to Israel. There is coming a day when I am going to build you back up. I am going to lift up your horn, which means your authority, your strength. That's coming back to you. So you're in a bad place now. Yes. It's stored up for you, and but I've got something coming. So don't give in, don't get discouraged, don't walk away, don't be broken about this. Your day is coming. That is a heavy book of prophecy, and that is Ezekiel 29. Now we're going to go into chapter 30. It's talking about the desolation of Egypt. Then he's got another enemy to deal with, the Assyrians. And he has to destroy them because they have a problem. He had a problem with them. And then there's going to be the whole lament over Egypt. And then Ezekiel is going to uh, encourage the people to stay on their duty. The shepherds of Israel will be reproved. So he's getting everything back in order, getting ready to set them back in their place after their 70 days, 70 years judgment. But Egypt only gets 40. But God's got something for them at the end. So this is a lot. This is a lot. I thank those of you who have been strong enough and encouraged enough and determined enough to follow all of this, because you don't generally hear about the book of Ezekiel in these particular prophecies. And these are prophecies that all bring understanding to us about a lot of things. He said it's for our learning and our admonition. If we don't take it, we don't study it, we don't get it. So hey, I'm about 17 minutes over. But that was a very, very good chapter. All right, so anyway, we are at the end of chapter number 29. I'm going to go ahead, publish this, and I'm going to have it search engine optimized so that it can go around the world. Hopefully, others will receive strength from what we're doing. Okay? All right, well, with that in mind, I am going to say thank you for joining us on this beautiful, well, it was cold. I got blessed to be on a 3-day work week. So I am able now to give my time and study and get rest for my body as I'm fighting this lupus. And believe me, I'm having my ups and downs, but it's cyclical. It's just not going as far up into the depths. I'll be talking about it soon, but it's getting better. But I want to talk about it because I feel like people need to know there's some things that are normal, but you can recover yourself. All right, that's enough. Okay, so God bless you all. Thank you for following. And at this time, I am going to just thank you once again for joining us and ask you to be with us again. We come back on Wednesday. On Wednesday, it will be the Bible class. Thank you. Be the Bible class. And on hopefully my husband will be with me on this one. But then on Thursday, on next Monday, we'll be in chapter 31. Now these are things, like I said, you're not going to hear, but there are lessons in these verses that you can never gain unless you read them. And so God is giving us opportunity to learn things and to equip ourselves. Our country is in trouble. This world is in great danger. And because of iniquity has abounded and greed is having its way, there's a lot coming here in America as well as over in other parts of the world. So we have to go ahead and be vigilant, humble, pure hearted, and seeking God at all times. All right. So again, thank you for joining me. God bless you. God keep you. And God have mercy on you all. And we'll see you Wednesday, and then we'll see you again next Monday for chapter 30. Love you all in Jesus'